Hello everybody, I am back with Joe Builds It, and today I'm going to be building a Warhammer Flamer. Not these Zeech ones, and unfortunately the actual Flamer bit is kind of a single piece, so I've got something a little different for us today. A life-sized prop Flamer designed based on the Flamer in Darktide. So I'm going to go through some basic cleaning of this 3D model, just some really simple stuff, and then we're going to mask it off with a little bit of painter tape, and we're going to paint it, and then we're going to build it. So let's start off. I'm going to get a few of these pieces so you can kind of get a sense of the scale. So that being the heat shroud, this is the body. It comes in two gargantuan pieces. It's ridiculous. And we've got, let me see if that's even in, that's not even in frame. Hold on, let me zoom out a bit. All right. So this is about what we're looking at. The handle is honestly a little big, but it fits in snug. Oh, this is going to be a good time. All right. So, too big. Cleanup. When you buy or you have someone do a 3D printed item for you, a lot of times there'll be supports, which are these little tiny leftover pieces. And what they do is there are little pillars in each one of these circles that make sure that there's no droopy filament. So what I like to do is go in with a hobby knife and just gently get the hobby knife under the filament. You aren't really cutting into the plastic because these little chunks are not really glued on or heat welded or anything. They're just kind of chilling out, stuck. So they need a little bit of assistance. And on the ones I print, it's I'll zoom in a little for that. It's a grid pattern. And I can just, boom, easy. So I'm gonna go through, really quickly do all this. Now, this is the prototype, well, I guess the second prototype, but the first print of the do-it-yourself Flamer. I absolutely have grown to love making life-size cosplay props from 3D printing. And it's what I've been doing a lot lately, aside from getting into dirty little Votan. They're just nasty little angry guys. But yeah, I kind of took a hiatus because life got a bit crazy. I won't get into that because these days, the less stress everyone has, the better. All right, I'm gonna flip that. And there's definitely more on the bottom side. Sometimes they crack a lot, but it's not too bad. And always make sure you're using the very base of your hobby knife so it doesn't break. I've chipped more than a few, or snapped more than a few hobby knives and broken my fair share of drill bits by not really respecting my tools. The last thing you want is a chunk of plastic and a chunk of metal flying at you. So I'm going to slide that to the side. I'm going to get to the body. It's really the only piece that's going to be difficult to assemble. And the reason is that when it was designed, there's not an easy, good place to really cut this. You know, there's no natural seams along this giant body. So what I've done is I placed a few small holes. It actually looks like the bottom two came out well on this one, but this top one, oh, there we go. Just had a little bit of goop in it. Now, I believe these are a few millimeters thick. Oh yeah, I don't want to do that. And originally were made for wire clothes hangers because, you know, for some reason I thought wire clothes hangers are easy to get. They're everywhere. it's surprisingly difficult to find them for me. There we go. So what I've done is I got a cooking dowel and I shaved it down just a little bit. These aren't going to be really supporting it and keeping it together. That's what the glue will do. All this is going to do is help it line up properly. So let's see if I can get this in all of them. Yeah, that is simple and easy, and honestly, I need to find and make some basic pegs. I'm hesitant to 3D print them, but to include in these kits because this is a design that I did. I'm very happy with it. It is, honestly, it's up there with some of my favorite painted minis. I feel very accomplished with this one, which is why I'm showing it off. Let me redo this part a little. Yeah, advanced high-tech 3D printing, and then I'm putting it together with literally sticks. So I'm going to do a test fit. There's a bit of a gap there. Let's see if we can just squish that together. We've got some support right here. Pop that off. And I'm leaving like little chips all over. That's not a big deal when it comes to 3D printed stuff. I'm actually gonna trim one of these because when we get into the painting step, we'll be using filler primer. You know, the kind of paint you never want to look at when you're working with Warhammer minis. This stuff will fill all these little tiny gaps. And I've noticed this also has a bunch of small hairs. Some of that is cats, because I have 4. But other points is where the 3D print is a little hairy. And if you take a heat gun or a hairdryer, oh yeah, perfect example is right in here. I've got these strings. If you ever get a 3D print that has those, you take a heat gun or a hairdryer to it and just gently, I like to think of doing a flambe. But the strings are so thin that the heat will just melt them down. They'll turn into these little kind of nubs, and then you can just pop it off. Easy peasy. Assembly. This is where things get crazy. 3D printed plastic isn't your normal, average, everyday plastic. And if you've ever worked with 3D printed terrain, you might have just used like Gorilla Glue. Boom. I used to swear by blue cap Gorilla Glue, and I liked an accelerant called Extreme Power. And then the more big things I made, I got into this stuff called PLA glue. It's really expensive. I think this bottle's like $50, and it is very smelly, and I keep it in this crazy bag. It's all padded. It's crazy toxic, and I like to avoid things that make my nose burn. So when I apply that, it's outdoors, mask up, all the works, and it has about a 24-hour cure time, which is a pain in the butt. So I'm doing this 3D print for my buddy, and he wants a Big Zam Gundam at 1/100th scale. I know nothing about Gunpla, and then he goes and he shows me it's going to be like 4 feet tall. So it's this, actually it's I think 4 or 5 feet wide. But he tells me he uses Hobbytown or Insecure and Instaset, and we get these at Hobbytown. These labels come off, so it's just a brand. I don't even know what brand this is. Here we go, BSI ink. And I've seen this Instaset around, and it's never really worked with the glues I use everywhere. But with this stuff, it works crazy. I thought this was just for gap filling, but he built part of that giant 3D print with this stuff. And I don't work with this huge bottle. I put it in a little painter dropper bottle because I get these en masse for dirt cheap. So he just kind of slathered it on, and then he had a spray bottle for this. I like these little hobby syringes for easy application. You just kind of dunk it in, pull out a little. What I'm okay with this accelerant is that it doesn't smell like a horrible chemical factory. It does smell like someone else's grandmother's house, is the best way I can describe it. His place smelled like it because he was actually building a lot. And I didn't know what the heck it was until I got this myself. So I'm just going to do big strokes. I'm going to put just big old globs. I'll put some on each of these rods as well. The downside with this stuff is it runs really fast because it's a gap filler, so it's made to just squeeze into the gaps. Fill them up, and then you put the Instacure on and you're set. But what's great about that for 3D printing is these micro lines, it gets set in them, which is perfect. All right, that's not a perfect lineup. I'm going to do the best I can because we can sand this down. I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure. Oh geez, it's already setting. Okay, ran out of time very quickly. Here's a paper towel. I'll wipe away excess glue. So that was good. I've got a little micro line here, maybe a tenth of a millimeter. If you know I go and I paint it and it doesn't go away, the cool thing is you just sand down the paint a little. I'm still going to apply a little bit of the Instaset along that seam. Now, I'll be honest, with that PLA gloop, I have tried it and swung swords around like a madman, and it's held. It will break the print before the adhesive. I haven't tried that with Instacure Plus because everything I've used for it has just been display. I haven't really gone to any conventions since the Warhammer Grand Narrative last year, which I'll be at the Open Narrative in Kansas City and then the Grand Narrative in Atlanta this year. All right, let's get this aside. We've got a lot here. We have the body, the head, we have a little piece. This one's actually got a problem right here. I'm going to reprint it sideways for the future ones. This piece fits in right here. Let me get the whole assembly for that. It's kind of neat. Just to show you how simple it is to assemble. Okay. Oh, there's so many parts off camera. Here we go. This is the part where the starter goes, and I've got a few more little supports that just shave right off. Easy. Some spots that you won't really see are kind of dirty. And you won't see that because the piece actually fits in there. That fits in snug there. This piece will fit partially in here. This kind of locks onto it, touches the back. This glues in nice and snug. And the barrel, it's got some supports right there, but this is a spot that I'm never going to see, so I don't need to clean them as much. The barrel goes in there, the starter's right here, and you've got your assembly. What I did when I designed this is hold on. I tried to make it so that we can paint all these pieces individually without having much worry. Just a basic like army color and metal color. And I've been working with Bulldog props on a few things. My Gore Child design. And you'll notice a lot of these kind of look really crappy. This, like I said, this was kind of the test print prototype. I used some profiles on my printers that were for speed instead of quality, but it's just going to look amazing once it's fully painted. So I was working with Bulldog Props, and he was explaining what a lot of his clients want, and it's things like moving triggers and higher detail areas and easy to assemble without loss of detail. So he helped me out I do have a built-in moving trigger mechanism. You'd get pop a screw right here, screw it right on in there like a wood screw, and then you'd set a 6mm by 20mm spring in, and it will allow it to function. And this piece would just, I got printed up. Oh, that's right. Pop in and slide down there. Then you'd have, you know, your working trigger. But before I go out and I paint, let's get a few more pieces glued together. This is the top of the tank. Whoa. That is a bad support profile. Ooh. Man, how did I miss this? This guy did not print happily. The tank is removable. There we go. So if you're wanting to walk around with a few spare tanks on your belt or whatever, you sure can. Let's see, this part, all we really have to worry about is this circle lining up with that circle, which is pretty simple to do. So there's no pegs on this one. It's also, it's going to say non-load bearing. All it really carries is the Promethium tank. I'm sorry. I'm sure a lot of you are feeling the same. I'm just tired all the time. It's been a long while, but Warhammer has really helped me. It's kind of like my meditation. So I just applied a whole bunch of my glue here. And if you want really good bondings, do like 2-part epoxy. That stuff does not mess around at all. It's almost like dangerous adhesion. Then I'm going to apply a little bit of my Instacure. And a fun fact, this is also what I do when I build Forge World models, is this Instacure and Instaset. I give them a, excuse me, this is going to sound weird, but a Diet Coke bath, because there's a compound in Coca-Cola that eats away and deteriorates the release agent on Forge World models, and use Diet Coke because there's no sugar, because regular Coke has all that sugar and it's just going to leave your model really sticky. And then after that, I give it a warm soapy water soak for like a day, let it dry, and then it's so easy to work with. Easier than fine cast. I'm just digging out a few of these extra supports. I've got buttons and knobs all over. Tons of buttons and knobs for us. Some more little kind of like slag to work with. Okay, so as you can see, lots and lots and lots of pieces. I could glue all this together and then take it outside and spray paint it and be really frustrated because I can't reach certain parts. So we're going to kind of sub-assemble, which is what I was hoping this style of print would do. And to make sure that we don't get glue on our, or paint on the assembled parts, blue tack paint, painter's tape. And I'm just going to go through and put a little bit of tape on a lot of these parts so that I can spray paint the heck out of that, peel that tape off, and glue it just fine. It's a long, arduous process. Now, personally, I'm not going to try to grab the entire surface. A little bit more on this wouldn't hurt, though, because I also don't want to get the edges. Oh yeah, this was something I'm stupid proud of. It just slots in there. Super easy. But when I look at that slot, I know that we want this portion. I don't think this one needs to be clear. But we definitely want right here to be gluable, and this whole area. So I'm just just gonna do. As for what paints to get, I just go to like a home improvement store and get Rust-Oleum primer. If you can get car filler primer, which for some reason can be really difficult for me to find. Actually, that might plop on there. Let's find out. Oh no, that goes right here. Come on. There we go. If you can get car filler primer, it works great. I used to prime everything with it. It never comes off. It's fantastic stuff. But I don't have any auto stores near me that carry it. So what I do is I get, just basic outdoor filler primer. I give it a good coat, and then once the paint stops showing gloss and starts to give a little matte, I give it another coat. And what I have found is that second coat, it fills in all the little extra gaps, and it just works like a charm. This piece, if I recall correctly, slots right here. Don't worry about that little guy. Luckily, we won't see it, but it is definitely an issue that I left. And I'm lazy. I should have reprinted it before this video. But I did my first tiny craft show where it's all sorts of local vendors and everything. And it was fun, but local vendors in my area and the people don't exactly want a whole bunch of really big weapons. Who would have thought, right? So I printed a bunch of other little small things, and it was a good time, but my goodness, it was 3 hours outside. I'm definitely an introvert. Right here, I'm just gonna plop that right there. It was okay. Hold on, off camera, I'm trying to move all the things that I've put the tape on. I've got it on the front. We need to put it on the back. It was a good time. I learned a bunch. I do want to making, painting, and selling props and everything more of a main hustle than a side hustle. It's my passion. And IT is not my passion. It is so not my passion that I have been very slow on getting a new job. So let's be honest, you can only be told you're doing everything wrong so many times. There we go. So, while I do this monotonous stuff, let's talk a little 10th edition. I am giddy with excitement, and I will admit, initially, there was some hesitance because, all the rumors were like, we're getting rid of the toughness stat, and it's going to be Age of Sigmar, and Age of Sigmar is not bad. I like Age of Sigmar. It's its own thing. It needs to stay different from 40k, and I'm glad they kept toughness. Mostly because I play Death Guard, Nurgle Demons, and Leagues of Votann with Irani Searcher Regulates, which is the +1 toughness. I just love tough, slow dudes. It's fun. I like the stat check part. Like, hey, come at me. You got a nice sword? Cool. I'm super tough. It doesn't hurt. So they kept that, which is great. They're actually readjusting everything. I'm sure you've seen that. Great Unclean Ones, Orc Stompas, possibly the Land Fortress with USR are going to be toughness 14, which I can't remember how tough a Warlord is, but we're also getting another wounds bump on quite a few things. We have an extremely simplified psychic phase, and that's the one spot where I'm really curious, like for an okay wizard psyker, sorry, like a Space Marine librarian, it looks awesome. Or orcs getting to jump right off the bat, super cool. But what's gonna happen to our Thousand Sons, our Eldar, and our Zeech demons, to where they're just, that's their bread and butter is, hey, mind bullets, deal with it. Zeech demons are disgusting with it. Oh yeah, and so to prevent the need for more pegs to line up things, I just printed these with a little inset. They pop on nice and smooth. That's the wrong side. There we go. Nope. Oh my gosh, I gotta label these. I'll have to have an instruction video. There we are. And these will just fit in nice and snug. Which, I guess I have this here, I should do that. Yeah, those extremely high-end psychic factions where it's just their bread and butter is psychic phases, my phase, deal with it. I'm kind of curious what they're going to do about that. It'd be great to just give all of them a whole bunch of cool abilities. Age of Sigmar does a thing where a lot of their psychers come with a unique psychic power. And a lot of times it's like a named character will get a really cool one. But with what we've seen, we haven't seen two psychers of the same faction, but the Space Marine Psyker has Smite, and it looks awesome. It looks like a great ability. I'm not shooting a bolt pistol when I have that. It reminds me of, I think 5th edition? Yeah. Now, I don't know if I should fit this part in before or after gluing or painting. I think I'm going to wait because I want this to be silver and this to be black. And the only really downside is, I think, black here, silver there, black here. We'll figure it out. We got time. So I'm going to mask that off. So back in my day, kiddos, the psychic phase was the shooting phase. And you would have various different types of weapons, or psychic weapons, like a Witchfire, which, yeah, Pink Horrors would just roll a die, or they'd do a psychic test. If they succeeded, they'd get like 2d6 strats at random strength. They were a thing. You'd still get to choose all your powers, and some of them would be like the shooting attacks. I think there was one, a Space Wolves one that was just like a plasma gun, but a psychic power. It was nice. I liked those days. They were kind of simple, and when they brought out Smite and Mortal Wounds, they kind of, I think, got themselves stuck in this area to where they don't have as many just basic, here's the psychic power, it hits like a melt-a-gun. That's it. That is quick, simple, and easy to me. And I think we're going to be getting that back, which makes me happy. Downside, though, honestly, biggest downside for me is the same thing I see with Age of Sigmar is, okay, new edition, let's see what power this mini I have that I lovingly painted and adore, and it's like my favorite dude ever. His psychic power is roll a d6 for every model in the unit. On a 6, they take a mortal wound. I hate those. They are the least fun thing in the game for me, is fishing for 6s on a psychic power to do a mortal wound. Because after Blast, what are you rolling, like 10 dice, maybe? For a big unit? So I'll be happy if those go the way of Old Yeller. Just taken out back. Leave them alone. Get rid of them. This main piece is a lot. For Space Marine players, we're getting so many things in transports. It's crazy. I am so excited that they've just kind of, it sounds like they're getting rid of the Primaris keyword as a whole, and it won't limit us. Like, hey, Terminators in a repulsor, Wolfen in a repulsor. Hey, you know what's not going to be fun? Eradicators in drop pods. Have fun. Turn 1, melt range. Deal with it, sucker. You can't stop my total obliteration. Which, if anything, get rid of that. That's enough ranting about it. Cover is super simplified. And I have always felt like covers are a really cool tactical part of the game. I love how much variety there is. I loved planning out the table, and I loved forgetting everything I set up immediately. It's a lot. It's cool, but it's a lot. To be honest, I don't know what part of the flamer this is, but it goes right here. Like what function it serves on the actual weapon. I think this guy fits right there. Looks like there's a little blob of plastic, so I'm just gonna clean that off. I've actually been doing a lot of Crusade, and we used power level when we started. You know, it's what the rules say. But then as they started really balancing armies and these massive points changes they've done, like Space Marine War Gear being free, I've seen a lot of power level that's actually much worse than points now. And it's not all about, hey, this is strong. The biggest downside of power level for me and a few of my friends is with like my Space Wolves or my Voton, I have a bunch of units of 3, like the Blade Guard, Thunder Wolves, Pioneers. I don't like running them as just 3. I like to run them as, you know, like 3 core guys and 2 albulative dudes who can just take hits. They are here to protect the rest. You know what? I'm going to demonstrate. I have this nice little heat gun my loving mother gave me. An embossing heat tool. And I'm going to hit all this. Hair dryers will work just fine. And then I just kind of rub off all that excess. So I like to bring like a unit of 5, or like Blood Crushers. Bring a unit of 4 or 5, and also the Lookout Sir bonus. And you can't really do that in Crusade, because as soon as you bring 4, it doubles the cost. So the GW events are power level, so I'm still prepping that with one of my buddies who's going to the Kansas City event and the November Atlanta event. But we've been running a Crusade where it's points, but almost all war gear is free. We came up with a little house rule that unless the war gear is like 20 or 30 points, just make it free. And normally I'd be like, that's a terrible rule, but we had 3 brand new players with us, and they were very overwhelmed by building lists with all the updates and adjustments that we kind of dumped on them. So we definitely understand that a late Warhammer edition is very hard to get into. And Warhammer definitely has that reputation of still being the crunchy, giant, expensive, difficult game to get into. And I think Games Workshop is working on getting away from that, and that's just about the best thing ever. My least favorite edition transition was 7th to 8th. That was an experience that I was really worried we would be getting again. But not to simp too much, GW's grown a lot as a company. I mean, if you have played through 6th and 7th and 8th and 9th, it's like watching a kid grow up, I'd imagine. They've gone from, like in 5th, it was no communication whatsoever. They'd just come out with a new mini and it'd be there. If you walk into a shop, there's a new mini. What is it? My favorite was, I went to a hobby shop in the middle of nowhere. It's like a 2-hour drive. I get there and they have this really cool mini, and it's called Lone Wolf with Lightning Claws. It's basically Wolverine, the Space Wolf. And he was, I think, the only Lone Wolf mini they made. Let me check this. Let's see. Yeah, only the inside. He's a really cool mini. And then, like, immediately the next edition, they got rid of the ability to take that loadout. So it's just beautiful miniature. They probably had just a really talented artist make it, put it out. I bought it in a heartbeat. I think I might still have it. It was pewter. It was terrible to work with. But the moral is Games Workshop just said, hey, here's a new mini. Deal with it. It was kind of we saw in 8th edition that they limited war gear based on what was in the box. And I think that was a heavy-handed attempt to fix what they used to do back in the day, which was the opposite, where it's here's war gear that doesn't exist in physical form. What I'm doing here is I put the tape down and then I use my crappy little nails and I kind of go around it and it pushes it down. And that led to, history lesson, the Chapter House Studio lawsuits. There's a company called Chapter House Studio, and they designed and sold all the bits that Games Workshop didn't. Like, I don't know off the top of my head. There was a lot of them. But they'd sell them as like, this is a Space Marine Dreadnought plasma gun. Just a rough example. And Games Workshop said, hey, you can't do that. We sell that. And Chapter House Studio said, no, you don't. So Games Workshop came back and said, well, we trademarked Space Marine. And that was a big thing. And I think the result was Games Workshop being told, hey, Space Marine is a bit too generic of a term. You can't have it to yourself. Hence, Adeptus Astartes, Astra Militarum. Eldar was fine, but they went with Eldari. I guess if everyone's getting a rename, so should they. And what we ended up with is me having a collection of 77 Plague Marines with a loadout they can't take. And it breaks my heart. Doesn't break my heart that much. It is sad. 8th edition Plague Marines could be like, you know what, 20 guys, bring whatever you want. Everyone can have a power axe, because Plague Marines are dope. And then their 9th edition book, which I have to admit is a lot less janky and more reasonable, but I hate that I have like 20 Plague Marines with a power axe, and you can bring like 2 per unit. This one. Yeah, so the support in here, this is actually, it's kind of fun. It's a little squishy. We can go in and try to pick all this out. But because it's a little squishy in here, it's just going to push down. And we have a lot of surface area around the top and the inside. This is the barrel. That's better. So all I'm going to do for this one is just... Oop. But going way back to my point of my rambling. Sorry, I haven't done this in a long time. I forget how to not ramble. Is the terrain rules getting super simplified? Terrain rules used to be bonkers. It was very similar to what we're seeing in 10th. And it was like, if half your unit is hidden behind this, you get cover. And cover was just a static save. In that case, it was a static 4-up save. So there were units like Terminators where it was like, yeah, I don't care about cover unless you shoot me with an AP weapon that goes through my armor, which there were a bunch of. So with this edition, we're losing, what are we losing? Geez. Dense, we're losing heavy. I don't know, I think we're losing difficult. It looks like barricades are still here. For this one, it goes on top. No, we want the whole shebang. And it's all just like, hey, you gain cover, it's +1 to your save. That's it. And playing Voton, I'm kind of happy with that because I have spotlights and cats who are fighting. Fiends, get away from us. I think a spotlight to ignore dense cover. I've got these dudes with goggles that ignore dense cover, and I've got this other upgrade that ignores light cover. And I'm over there and I'm like, here's some ruins on the table. It gives cover. Have fun. All right. Just about done here. I actually have a legitimate prototype. The first one I printed, it was not printed in so many parts. It was a pain in the butt to assemble. I'm so glad I went and redid it, but I've got it in the trunk of my car. I took it to that booth. Everyone took a picture with it because it's just cool to have a giant flamethrower. So we're getting some simple stuff. We're getting the new terrain that is elevated. So I think if you are 6 inches off the ground, you can shoot down on stuff and ignore other terrain and also gain AP. Here's my Turbo Nerd complaint. Where's the mini? I have minis everywhere. Okay. So current edition, I've got a dude, and then 5 inches up is obscuring terrain that I've gone out and made sure that all of my terrain is 5 inches or higher. And now I'm realizing that I sit up on that terrain, I'm 5.5 inches off the ground, but it doesn't do anything for me. Oops. But you know, I don't do tournaments, and that's just going to be easy enough to say, hey, this terrain that's 5 inches, it's elevated. Look at that. That was easy. Now we don't have to worry. Sure, the rules say 6, but so much of my terrain is 5. And I've 3D printed, painted, played on, re-3D printed, and redone tables so often. It's not a big deal. I think I'm actually all out of 3D printed terrain right now in general. Just because I sold most of it. Almost done. You know what? We'll leave those little bits on. I don't need to pull them off. And the trigger, this is the part of the model that I am the least happy with and I want to redesign. First off, getting this in and out is kind of a hassle. I mean, you shouldn't need to get it in and out, but oh my goodness, can you see all those support scars? It's just bad because I printed it like so this whole thing had to be elevated. What I think I'm going to do is cut along the handle and then maybe put a little flat spot back here so that I can print this piece flat, like so. The screw definition, you know, these might not come out that great, but what will be amazing is all the interior definition will be fantastic. And then I can print this separate, maybe do a key slot like here. Yeah, I think that could work. So I might redesign this a bit. I've got the file up on Etsy, but I think I want to redesign it before I sell pre-done kits, just because I'm the one who has to get all these supports off, and it's a hassle. Such a hassle. Just gonna throw a little bit of tape in there. Up. Okay, that fits in. Huh. Oh, nope, that's just me being a dum-dum. Tear this. Man. Long story short, I'm very excited for 10th. It's got a lot of callbacks to the previous editions. The terrain stuff is more simple, but some of it is, it's easier, it's better. The only piece of terrain I'm a little sad about leaving is dense terrain, because it was nice, but then towards the end of this edition, there's so many force multipliers. Like, okay, we've got dense terrain in the middle of the table. Guess what? My whole army ignores it, so it only hurts your army. Or we've got this dense terrain, so you're -1 to hit, but you're +1 to hit from this thing. But I'm going to use a stratagem, so you're -1 to hit. Easy elementary school math. But I'm rerolling all attacks and 1s to wound, except you can't reroll wounds against me. And you end up doing all these adds, minuses to end up with, you know, like, oh, you were just hitting normally and I got +1 on my cover save. Done. A few times you'd be -1 to hit. Okay. Oh, one last terribly printed piece. I've also been considering, for these tubes, of printing them in resin, because when they're plastic, they always will have spots where there were either supports that won't sand and clean well. Even if printed like this, you know, so the bed's flat, the bottom end here won't look great, and you'll end up with some odd spots on top. And this guy just doesn't print well. But making those resin, doing a high detail version of my Gorechild axe where the insert is resin. All right, there we go. I'm going to go spray paint for like an hour. My hand is going to be sore, and I'll build it when I'm back.